Project 24 began as a continuation of Project 23, with the very initial TTZ going out in 1941. Progress on the design was slow. But in 1944 the Design Bureau made the decision to drop the split battery 152/100ths of a millimeter with a 130 mm universal battery, and to swap out the 37 mm anti-aircraft guns with new 45 mm guns. The split battery was apparently kept for options, but never seriously considered again. In December 1945, Kuznetsov approved the final basic project ideals for Project 24, which essentially consisted of two goals: complete domination against any surface ship and enhancing the combat stability of the fleet. Additional aims were to engage in coastal bombardment and support of landing forces. In June 1949, the design was again modified. The Deputy Commander of the Navy organized a commission to analyze and recommend changes to the Project 24 design. The conclusion was that a main armament of 3 triple turrets of 406 mm caliber was insufficient, and that a 457 mm battery was needed. They specifically cited the Iowa battleships, and allowed for improvements in the current 406 mm design or the 457 mm battery. A universal battery of 12 by 130 mm guns was requested, with a note for a need to develop a quadruple 130 mm mount. Anti-aircraft armament would consist of 16 by 45 mm and 10 by 25 mm guns. The various electronics and detection systems were also set. When this report was submitted to Ivan Yumashev, the commander of the Navy, additional notes said that a displacement of 80,000 to 100,000 tons and a speed of 30 knots was desired, and the 457 mm was again pushed for. Fun side note: the Soviet Office of Naval Intelligence recommended against building battleships. The 457 mm gun was designed, reportedly achieving a firing range of nearly 52 kilometers, but it was absurdly heavy and was expected to raise the standard tonnage of the ship to 86,000 t. Around this time, Stalin became interested in the progress of the ship. Reportedly, he was angry at how the designers inflate the displacement of the battleship, and when asked what armament he desired, he said nothing more than 9 by 406 mm. I would imagine that no one was going to ignore his words, so the 457 mm design was not continued. In March 1950, the design called Scheme 13 was taken to be used as the basis of the final design, and in April Yumashev gave the order to reduce the displacement as much as possible. Scheme 13 was planned to fully meet the TTZ. Just a few months later, the design of Project 24 was shifted to a different design bureau, from TSNII 16 to TSNII 45. The new Design Bureau looked at the design, and almost instantly recommended to the Ministry of Shipbuilding that the design should be halted, as they would be creating a ship with capabilities of World War II without taking into account the technological changes of 1950 and beyond. They instead put forth the idea of several smaller battleships. The Ministry of Shipbuilding read the report, and published their own report to the Naval Minister with the following conclusions. The TTZ creates a battleship of the Second World War, and does not take into account the progression of technology. There are no design requirements regarding protection against missiles and guided bombs. The chiefs of the ministry do not believe the construction of such a battleship would be a justified use of public funds, and as such recommend studies into possible smaller battleships. Research and design of new jet and rocket weapons should be done, and it is possible for a TTZ to be made incorporating these into a battleship. The Projekt 24 battleship should be postponed while a new design be worked on through 1951 and submitted in 1952. This spelled the end of Projekt 24. When Stalin died in March 1953, there was little reason to continue any development on Projekt 24, and the new government decree on shipbuilding cancelled many of the projects that were in place. Projekt 82 was included in these. The ship we know as Stalingrad. Due to push from the Commission to have 18 inches armament, I have included the 3X triple 457 mm mount as an option. Plans existed for both 4x2 and 3x3, but seeing as how we already have Conqueror, it would be better to have the 3x3 for Projekt 24. The main challenge with using the 457 mm is due to the scarcity of data and resources surrounding it. The mass of the 18 inches projectile is up to 1,720 kilograms, which is simply massive. Yamato's 46 cm Type 91 shell is only 1460 kilogram. The British 1845, used on Conqueror, has the 1,506 kilograms AP shell, and the only other point of comparison would be the American 1847 Mark A super heavy shell, which comes in at 1,746.3 kilograms, 3,850 pounds. But while the 1847 super heavy shell was leaving the barrel at 732 meters per second, the Soviet 457 mm is an L-55, which gives an MV of 820 meters per second, value taken from the original datum and information. The damage value for the shell comes in at 14,700, only 100 less damage than Yamato's shells. The air drag for this AP shell is 0.2618, which is exceptionally small. Yamato's 46 cm is 0.29. Seeing as how this would be another case of 9 barrels, the main gun Sigma will likely need to be approximately 2.0 or 1.9 unless WG figures out a different way to balance out the gunnery. I personally lean towards the 406 mm 50 Mk1M as my preferred option. But it does make sense to include the 457 mm as a side grade considering the history behind it, and we already have the data for it in the game, which make it almost certain that it will appear in some form. There is a lot to digest regarding this armor scheme. It is incremental, I guess. You do have a main belt of 450 mm thickness over the magazines and 410 mm over machinery, closed off by 315 mm bulkheads. However, extending out forward is a 400 mm nasal bulkhead. And between the nasal bulkhead and the traditional frontal bulkhead is a 150 mm belt and a 100 mm deck. I struggle to see how any ship could achieve a frontal penetration into the citadel. But technically Grower Kurfurst is also immune to frontal citadels due to the 60 mm armoring on the beak. Where Projekt 24 will set itself apart is the amidships weather deck, which is 60 mm. Now note that it is only in the middle of the ship where the superstructure is. The fore and after deck are essentially unarmored. How WG will treat the extremities is anyone's guess, as the vertical sides are also unarmored aside from the thin 50 mm strip in the same way that Moskva and Stalingrad have them. A fair amount of the superstructure is armored, but it is only 10 to 20 mm of protection over things like the smokestacks and electronics towers. The conning tower is protected very well, but there should be enough for that not to be an issue. In terms of heat vulnerability, I would consider Projekt 24 to be around the same level as Grower Kurfurst or a little better. The superstructure should still be weak to 8 inches. Only that the amidships weather deck will be immune to all cruiser heat aside from Hindenburg IFHE, for the crazy ones out there. The 60mm weather deck with 165mm main armor deck means it should have no problems against AP bombs, and at longer ranges shells should have issues getting through the 165mm deck. The Citadel should be at the waterline in a 410mm broadside belt is by no means immune to Tier 9 X battleship AP, so I don't expect any real protection from big damage if one were to expose sides. Which is overall what I believe is the major weakness of the ship, and the primary way it will be defeated. Due to the overall weakness in terms of anti-surface firepower. If one were to split the ship's attention and catch it out in the open, Projekt 24 would go down with shots into the side. Another way it might go down is due to air strikes. But only under certain conditions. AA DPS numbers: long range 5.7 km, 223.2 mid-range, 3.5 km, 247.2 mid-range, 3.1 km, 126 cumulative, 596.4 nearly 600 total DPS. Which is barely the highest in the game. Conqueror would come in second place with 594 total DPS at 3.5 km. This will initially seem like far too much, but a certain disclaimer does need to be said. The 12x quad 45mm mounts are similar to the 40mm Bofors mounts, in the sense that there is no protection for them at all, and any sizable He shell 6+ will instantly destroy them. These 45mm mounts is where the majority of the total DPS comes from, which means that only the long-range DPS remains, as they will be difficult to destroy. Therein lies the only problem. The long-range DPS is the most of any ship in the game, and if anyone takes both AA range increases, AAGM2 and aft, they will end up with 223 DPS at 8.2 km, which is absolutely disgusting. I don't know how this value could change unless WG artificially nerfs the DPS value only for Projekt 24, which is technically possible, as they could argue the BL110A is a different mount and therefore receives a different DPS value. Projekt 24 won't have DFAA, furiously knocks on wood, so it won't get massive burst power from the long-range DPS like AA cruisers can. So a determined Tier 10 carrier can likely still get a good strike on a lone ship. Possible consumables: stepping back and considering the entire line. It appears that WG may switch away from the modified damage control party that is used on October Revolution. While I do like the idea of it, I can also understand why it has not been included in more recent Soviet premium ships. The rapid recharge of the modified DCP allows the ship to be much more resilient to incoming fire, provided the player understands how to time it all out. But after the limited charges are gone, there is no recourse for the player to mitigate damage other than Repair Party, which also has limited charges. I would take either the standard or modified DCP for the main battleship line, provided that it all worked well with the rest of the ship characteristics. As far as other consumables, I struggle to consider any aside from the one nasty consumable that should never have gone on a battleship. Surveillance radar would make sense thematically for the high-tier Soviet battleships, tiers IXX, as they were intended to be serving in the era where radar was prevalent. Projekt 24 is a serious outlier, as it was designed with a whole host of capabilities, including an entire suite of fire control and surveillance radars, active, passive HF sonar, IR detectors and various other sensors. But I really do not want to see any more battleships with surveillance radar. I did at one point come up with some wild idea for a high-speed reconnaissance plane, which behaved much like the current spotting aircraft Consumable, but did not provide the camera angle change and traveled much faster, so as to provide sweeps like a radar, but not actually radars, but I doubt WG would go with that.